What if the greatest power you have over those who wound you is a power they can never touch, a victory they can never comprehend? What if the ultimate response to an attack is not a counterattack, but a profound and unshakable silence that renders the initial blow meaningless? For centuries, we have been taught that a wound demands a reckoning, that an insult requires a retort. But the ancient Stoics knew a deeper truth about human nature, a secret to invulnerability that lies not in armor or weapons, but in the architecture of the mind itself. Stay with me, and I will show you how this inner citadel is built, and why its silence is more definitive than any shout of rage. A response that not only preserves your dignity, but fundamentally alters the very nature of the conflict. Before we venture further into this ancient terrain, a word of caution is necessary. The philosophy we explore here is a powerful tool for self-mastery and resilience, but it is not a substitute for professional guidance. This is an educational exploration of timeless ideas, not medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. The path of a philosopher is one of careful self-reflection, and you alone are the ultimate judge of what is right for your own life. When facing serious personal challenges, always consider consulting qualified professionals who can provide tailored support. Our journey today is to understand a principle, not to prescribe a universal cure. The person who seeks to harm you, to diminish you with words or deeds, operates on a simple, almost primal assumption that you will react. They are casting a stone into what they believe is a placid pond, anticipating the splash, the ripples of anger, the waves of grief, the undertow of revenge. Their sense of power is derived entirely from the disturbance they create in you. They throw the spark. You, by reacting, provide the fuel, and the fire that consumes your peace is the one they bask in. They need your participation. They need you to acknowledge the blow, to validate its importance by showing a scar. This is the unspoken contract of aggression. But what happens when you refuse to sign? What happens when the stone is cast and the pond does not ripple? What happens when there is no splash, no echo, no acknowledgement that it ever landed? This is not mere passivity. It is a form of power so profound that it operates on a different plane of existence from the initial attack. The aggressor is playing checkers, you are sculpting marble. They are expecting a dialogue of pain, but you offer them only the monologue of their own futility. The Stoics understood that most of our suffering comes not from the event itself, but from the story we tell ourselves about the event. This is the first and most crucial insight. Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and rose to become a revered teacher, knew this intimately. He argued that things external to us, what people say, what they do, our reputation, our wealth, are not truly in our control. The only thing that is truly ours, the only domain where we are absolute sovereigns, is our own mind, our judgments, our choices, our will. He called this our times prohairesis asterisk, our faculty of moral choice. Everything else is an indifferent, meaning it is indifferent to our moral goodness. The attack, the insult, the betrayal, these are external events. They are, in a philosophical sense, neutral. They are like the weather. It may rain on your parade, but the rain itself is not malicious. It is our judgment. This rain has ruined my day. It is a disaster, a personal affront that creates the suffering. The person who hurts you hands you a script. The script says, you are diminished. You are a victim. You must be angry. You must seek justice. To react is to accept your role in their play. But you have the power to reject the script. You can look at the event, the betrayal, the insult, and choose a different judgment. You can choose to see it not as a wound to your core self, but as a demonstration of their character. You can see it as information about the world, rather than a verdict on your worth. This is not about pretending it didn't happen. It's about understanding where the event ends and where your story about it begins. By refusing to fuel their narrative, you starve it of oxygen. The fire they hope to start dies out for lack of air, and all that remains is the cold, useless cinder of their original intent. Consider the story of a man we will call Alex, a brilliant software engineer who co-founded a promising tech startup with his closest friend. For years, they poured their lives into the company, but as they neared a major breakthrough, his partner, driven by greed, orchestrated a legal maneuver that pushed Alex out, taking full credit and control. Alex was, by any measure, profoundly wronged. The script handed to him was one of a tragic hero betrayed, deserving of a dramatic revenge plot, and he accepted his role with a vengeance. His life became a campaign to destroy his former friend. He spent his savings on lawyers, his days drafting furious emails to investors, his nights composing scathing posts on social media. He neglected his health, his family, and his own remarkable talent. After 2 grueling years, he won. The lawsuit was successful, his partner's reputation was tarnished, and the company faltered. Alex had his revenge. He had made his enemy feel small, but as he stood in the rubble of his victory, he felt a hollowness that was more vast than any satisfaction. He had won the battle, but he had lost himself. His entire being had been defined by his reaction to the betrayal. His enemy had occupied the most valuable real estate in the world, Alex's own mind, rent-free, for 2 solid years. He had destroyed his enemy, yes, but only by first allowing the poison of that conflict to destroy his own inner peace, his own potential for creation and joy. Alex forgot the fundamental Stoic division. He focused all his energy on what was not in his control, his partner's actions, the legal system, public opinion, and in doing so, he abdicated the one thing he did control, his own response, his own character, his own life. This is the trap of conventional revenge. It forces you to remain tethered to the very person you wish to escape. Your anger is a chain, your hatred a bond. You are perpetually looking backward at the source of your pain, defining your present by a moment in the past. The Stoic path offers a radical alternative. Sever the tether, turn around, walk forward. The indifference we speak of is not a sullen, resentful silence. It is not the silent treatment, which is itself a form of aggression, a tool of manipulation designed to elicit a response. True Stoic indifference is a byproduct of a redirected focus. It is the natural consequence of deciding that your energy, your time, and your attention are too valuable to be spent on anything that does not contribute to your virtue and tranquility. It is a form of supreme self-respect. You are, in effect, saying, the project of building my character, of living a good life, of fulfilling my duties, is so all-consuming and so important that I literally do not have the resources to spare for this drama. You are not a priority. My peace is. This is not a message you send to them. It is a decision you make for yourself. The devastating effect it has on them is merely a side effect, an echo in a chamber you have already left. Let us explore what this looks like in practice. It begins with mastering your impressions. When the insult is delivered, when the betrayal comes to light, there is an initial flash of pain, of shock. This is natural, a part of our human wiring. The Stoics were not emotionless robots, they were masters of emotional processing. They distinguished between the first involuntary reaction, the blush of shame, the jolt of anger, and the second, considered response. The first is an impression, the second is our assent to that impression. The manipulator wants you to assent to the impression that you have been harmed. They want you to agree with the proposition, this is a catastrophe. The practice is to insert a pause between the impression and your assent. In that pause lies your freedom. It is the space where you can question the narrative. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote in his private journals, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now. In that pause, you can ask yourself, has this event harmed my character? Has it taken away my ability to be just, to be courageous, to be wise? The answer is always no. Another person's vice cannot stain your virtue unless you allow your reaction to become a vice in itself. They can lie about you, but they cannot force you to become a liar. They can betray you, but they cannot force you to become untrustworthy. Your core self, your times pro heresis asterisk, remains untouched, a fortress they cannot breach. Think of it as an inner citadel. The person who hurt you is at the gates, shouting, throwing stones, trying to find a way in. An untrained mind rushes to the walls, shouting back, throwing stones in return, becoming obsessed with the siege. The Stoic in training acknowledges the noise at the gate. It is an external event, after all, but does not allow it to dictate the life within the citadel. Inside, the work continues. The cultivation of wisdom, the practice of justice, the maintenance of a peaceful and orderly inner world. The aggressor, seeing no reaction, no panic defense, eventually grows tired. Their shouts become hoarse, their stones fall harmlessly. What is more humiliating for a besieging army than to be utterly ignored by the city they mean to conquer? To realize that their great war is, to the inhabitants of the fortress, nothing more than a minor, distant noise. This brings us to a second story, that of a woman we will call Maria, a talented graphic designer working in a competitive agency. For years, she was mentored by a senior partner, a woman she admired and trusted. Maria developed a groundbreaking campaign concept, one she believed would define her career. She shared it in confidence with her mentor, who praised it effusively. A week later, the mentor presented the entire concept to the board as her own. Maria was stunned, then heartbroken. For months, she was consumed by a quiet, corrosive bitterness. She didn't lash out like Alex. Instead, she withdrew. Her work suffered. She saw her mentor's success as a personal verdict on her own powerlessness. She assented to the impression, I have been erased. My talent is worthless if it can be stolen. I am a victim. Years passed. Maria left the agency, her confidence shattered, and took on mediocre freelance work, always living in the shadow of that betrayal. Her awakening was not dramatic. It came one afternoon in a dusty second-hand bookstore, where she happened upon a translation of Seneca's letters. Reading about the Stoic conception of the inner self, something clicked. She realized her suffering had not been caused by the theft of her idea. The theft was an external event, a demonstration of her mentor's flawed character. Maria's prolonged suffering was caused by her own judgment, the belief that another person's actions could define her worth. It was a hard lesson, learned late. She began the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding her inner citadel. She started designing again, not for fame or recognition, but for the love of the craft itself, the one thing that could never be stolen. She learned to separate the value of her work, which was an expression of her inner self, from the external rewards it might bring. Her peace returned, and with it, her brilliance. She never confronted her old mentor. She never had to. She had moved on to a plane of existence where that past event and that person were simply irrelevant. Her delayed awakening taught her that the chains that held her were not forged by her enemy, but by her own hands, and she alone had the key. So how does one build this citadel in the midst of a world that constantly tests its walls? It is done through deliberate, daily practice. It is about choosing your focus. The one who hurt you expects your downfall. They watch, they wait, they hope for signs of your demise. They believe they have planted a seed of destruction within you. The most powerful rebuttal is not to engage with them at all, but to tend to your own garden. Your success, your growth, your tranquility, these are the ultimate refutation of their attempt to harm you. But we must be precise here. The goal is not to become successful times in order to times humiliate them. That would be to fall back into the same trap as Alex, to make them the focus of your life, to let them define the terms of your victory. That is a subtle but venomous form of revenge. The Stoic path is different. You pursue excellence and growth because that is what a virtuous, rational being does. You build the best version of yourself as an end in itself. The fact that you're flourishing is a source of silent, helpless frustration for the one who wished you ill is, once again, a secondary effect. It is a consequence, not a goal. You win, but you win in silence, without ever acknowledging that a game was being played. With every step you take forward, with every new achievement, with every genuine smile, you send an unspoken message to the universe. The attempt to destroy me failed. In fact, it served as fuel for my forge. There is no punishment more devastating for a certain kind of ego than to witness the happiness of someone it tried to break. They expected to be the main character in the tragedy of your life. Instead, they find they are not even a footnote in the epic of your growth. They are left alone with their own bitterness, while you have moved on to build new worlds. This leads us to the idea of contempt, a word that must be handled with great care. The original video uses it as a weapon. For the Stoic, it is something different. It is not an active feeling of disdain you cultivate. Active, emotional contempt is still a bond. It still requires you to hold the other person in your mind. True Stoic contempt is a form of cognitive sorting. It is the rational conclusion that a person or action is irrelevant to your times, eudaimonia, times your flourishing, your state of moral excellence. It is the act of classifying something as not worthy of my thought. It is not a hot, passionate dismissal, but a cold, logical one. It is like an engineer disregarding a faulty piece of data. It is not done with anger, but with efficiency. You treat the person and their actions as if they never entered your story, because in the story that truly matters, the story of your character, they are, in fact, merely noise. A manipulator does not want to be hated. Hate, after all, is a form of profound recognition. It says, "You are important enough to be the object of my most powerful negative emotion." The manipulator craves impact. What you offer them, through this dispassionate sorting, is oblivion. You are not fighting them with shouts, but erasing them with silence. A silence born not of fear or weakness, but of supreme self-possession. This self-control is the highest form of power. The person who tried to hurt you expects a crumbling of your composure. They want to see you react, to beg, to explain, to argue. Each of those reactions hands them back a measure of control. When you argue, you are still engaged in their dialogue. When you defend yourself, you are accepting their premise that you are on trial. But when you respond with a calm, unwavering focus on your own path, control shifts entirely. You are not being passive. You are demonstrating a strength that few possess, the power to master oneself. This is where we must distinguish between walking away out of weakness and walking away out of strength. Walking away in a storm of unsent text messages and replayed arguments in your head is not Stoic. That is merely suppressing a reaction which will fester. True Stoic absence is a clean break. It is the result of a rational decision. It is an absence of mind as much as an absence of body. You choose to walk away without explanation because you understand that any explanation is still an attempt to engage with their frame, to seek their understanding or validation. You owe them nothing, least of all an accounting of your own peace of mind. Seneca, a Stoic statesman who endured exile and political intrigue, warned against arguing with those committed to their own folly. Their words are traps for your dignity. When you simply disappear, with class, without visible resentment, the person who sought a war is left standing alone on an empty battlefield. There is no one to fight. And in that void, they are left with only one thing to confront: their own actions. The victory they thought they had won begins to feel strangely hollow. It transforms into a mental prison of their own making, where they are both the inmate and the jailer, forced to replay their own choices without the distracting drama of your reaction. Let's witness this principle in its ideal form. Consider a final story, that of David, a senior project manager in a large construction firm. A younger, ambitious subordinate began subtly undermining him in meetings, taking undue credit for team successes and privately sowing doubts about David's leadership with senior executives. It was a classic power play designed to provoke David into a defensive, angry reaction that would make him look unstable and confirm the subordinate's narrative. David recognized the game immediately. He had trained in Stoic thought for years. He did not ignore the problem, for that would be a dereliction of his duty as a manager. But he also did not engage on the subordinate's terms. He never confronted him about the insults or the politicking. He never once showed a flicker of wounded pride. Instead, he doubled down on his own responsibilities. His reports became models of clarity and integrity, always giving generous and precise credit to every member of the team, including the subordinate. In meetings, when undermined, he would pause, calmly address the substance of the issue without acknowledging the personal slight, and steer the conversation back to the project's goals. He controlled what he could control: his own performance, his own character, his own words. The subordinate grew increasingly frustrated. His provocations met with a wall of calm competence. He escalated, becoming more obvious in his attacks. And now, without David's emotional reaction to cloud the issue, the subordinate's behavior became transparent to everyone else. His ambition was revealed not as drive, but as toxic narcissism. Senior leadership saw David's unwavering professionalism not as weakness, but as immense strength and stability. Within 6 months, the subordinate, having failed to get the reaction he needed and having exposed his own character flaws, was moved to another department where he quickly fizzled out. David was promoted. He never said a word against the man. He didn't have to. His excellence was his argument. His character was his verdict. He showed that the best revenge is, as the Stoics taught, to be unlike your enemy. This brings us to the relentless march of time. At first, the one who hurt you may feel a sense of triumph. They may mock your silence, interpreting it as weakness or defeat. But time is a relentless arbiter of truth. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, and you do not react, do not return, do not even mention their name, a subtle shift occurs. Their initial glee curdles into confusion. The confusion sours into doubt, and for some, the doubt festers into a quiet, gnawing guilt. They are left replaying an event that you have long since filed away and moved on from. They are haunted by a ghost that you do not even remember. Marcus Aurelius wrote that time is like a river, and if you wait by its banks, you will see the bodies of your enemies float by. This is often misinterpreted as a call for patient, morbid revenge. But the deeper Stoic meaning is about trust in the natural order of things, in time's logos asterisk. It is not about gleefully waiting for your enemy's downfall. It is about understanding that a life lived without virtue, a life of malice and deceit, is its own punishment. Such a life is inherently unstable, weak, and destined to collapse under its own weight. Your job is not to give it a push. Your job is to get out of its way, to continue building your own sturdy, virtuous structure on solid ground. You do not have to do anything. Your absence is the seed of their regret. Time and their own conscience will reap the harvest. So we return to our initial question. How do you gain power over the one who hurt you? You must redefine power itself. It is not the power to harm, to humiliate, or to control another person. That is the tyrant's definition of power, and it is a fragile, hollow thing. True power, the only kind that matters, is the power over your own mind, the power to choose your response, the power to maintain your tranquility in the face of chaos, the power to live a life of virtue and purpose, regardless of the actions of others. This is the power they can never touch. The final victory is not when they feel small. The final victory is when their size, their feelings, their very existence no longer register as a significant factor in your own well-being. The true triumph is to move forward with such dignity, purpose, and inner peace that you forget you were ever supposed to be a casualty. The person who tried to hurt you expected to create a storm within you. What they receive instead is something far more unnerving, the quiet, steady certainty that to you they were never the weather at all. They were just a passing cloud. A strong person, a person of true Stoic character, does not shout their strength. They do not need to. They simply stop looking back. And that quiet, forward motion, that unwavering gaze fixed on their own path, is what will ultimately reduce the memory of the injury and the one who inflicted it to nothing more than dust in the wind. This is the citadel you were promised, and its walls are built not of stone, but of choice. Its silence is not emptiness, but the sound of profound and unbreakable freedom. Having fortified our defenses against the disturbances of others, we might naturally ask, what is the next chapter? How do we move from a defensive posture to a proactive one, building a resilience so deep that it welcomes challenges as opportunities? This leads us to the Stoic practices of negative visualization and the art of times amor fati, times not just enduring our fate, but loving it. It is one thing to be the unshakable fortress. It is another to be the joyful ship's captain who learns to sail better in the storm. That, perhaps, is a journey for another time.